All right. Hi, everyone. I'm the philosophy bro anarchist for the purposes of this video, and I'm going to talk about this essay by the famous classic Russian anarchist, aka Anarchist Santa Claus, Pyotyr Kropotkin, who, like many classic anarchists, was actually a disillusioned socialist who moved to anarchism in order to accomplish socialist goals. And he was not like these stupid fucking anarcho capitalists today who think that all government is bad, but all capitalism is good. They were actually anti-government and anti-capitalist, which I think is more consistent, at least, even though I myself am not an anarchist. Anyway, I'm going to talk about Kropotkin, aka Anarchist Santa Claus's essay called The Spirit of Revolt, and his specific claim in this essay that government reform is impossible. And like I've talked about before in my channel a little bit, I'm interested in really radical political claims. And like a few other anarchists who I've mentioned before, I think I might have mentioned Kropotkin before too. He was an anarcho communist. So that seems like the ultimate oxymoron, really, right? An anarcho communist, because anarchism seems like the total opposite of communism, because anarchism seems inherently like no government, and communism inherently seems like government totalitarianism. But basically, his anarcho communism was kind of like the way the way he kind of would wanted it to work was similar to the way that a lot of classic anarchists kind of described it, which is actually the way that kind of libertarian socialists describe themselves today, which are somewhat synonymous with anarcho-syndicalists, which kind of means that uh, basically there's democratic ownership and voting on like everything, including corporations. But it's not that the government controls the corporations, it's that the employees at a company make voting decisions on it, and everyone makes it's like direct democracy or something like that, where everyone makes voting decisions on everything. And I think that's interesting. Like, I don't have any particular political ideology, although I'm somewhat of a left leaning centrist personally. But if I had to pick one, I think that would probably be it. Although, obviously, I can see a lot of problems with it too. And yeah, I actually, like, for example, I agree with the one of my favorite historians who I've mentioned on my channel before, Thaddeus Russell's criticism of, just well, he says this about Marxism and communism, but this applies to anarcho-syndicalism too, because you still have to be educated voters and vote a lot on various issues. It's just not for government issues; it's for issues in companies and in government. But his criticism is that that's just too much work. Why should you have to be expected to do that much work if you want to be if you want to have like a good functioning government? And I think that's a very good point. But anyway, like I was saying, so let's get to his reason for this. So the reason that Kropotkin, aka Anarchist Santa Claus, thinks that government reform is literally impossible is that the government, like basically all parts of the government, are interdependent. So if you try to reform one aspect of it, then it won't work because all of the other aspects of it will make up for the reform that you're trying to make, which, like, to me, if you think about it, that doesn't actually make sense because you're saying that reform is impossible because everything is interdependent. But if you're saying that reform is impossible because everything is interdependent, then by that logic, since it is so interdependent, that should make it easier to dismantle the government too. If it's so interdependent that if one thing happens to one part of it, it gets corrected by the other. But wait, does that mean that you can't reform it, but you also can't collapse it? Maybe that's what he's saying. But then if that's the case, if you can't reform it or collapse it, then like you can't accomplish your goal as an anarchist of no government anyway. So like you're just fighting a pointless battle. Anyway, I think that still though, regardless of what you think about that particular aspect, if you're talking about like the reasons behind that, if you're talking about the claim that government is so interdependent, it's also to an extent at least assuming that the government is so massively efficient, which seems counterintuitive for what you would think an anarchist would say about government. Because if he's saying that all it's so interdependent that it's somewhat self-corrective, so you can't reform it, then that mean that means that it operates so efficiently that it can't be changed. But anarchists often make the claim, and like libertarians too, of course, that government is so ineffective that you can't rely on it for anything. So if an anarchist, and obviously Kropotkin has criticisms of the efficiency of government, so if you fact like he's basically logically inconsistent because he, like other anarchists, talks about the fact that government is massively inefficient and can't do anything right, but then at the same time contradicts himself by saying that the government is massively inefficient and can't do anything right, but also they're so efficient that you can't reform them because if you try to do so, then the government apparatus corrects itself and prevents the reforming. Then that would mean that it's either that has to mean that it's either more efficient than you say it is, or it's it's efficient and or you're either contradicting yourself because it's more efficient than you say it is, or you're contradicting yourself because by admitting that if it is more efficient then you can reform it. So it either by his own logic it has to be the case that it either the government is actually more efficient than he claims it is, in which of the case there's less of a case for anarchism and no government at all, or he's contradicting himself because because not only is the government more efficient than he says it is, but if it is as inefficient as he claims it is, then it shouldn't logically make reforms impossible because if the government were so inefficient, then you would think it would be easier to reform it because it wouldn't be as interdependent because the parts would operate more separately from each other, because that would be how something would operate less efficiently if the different aspects of the government were less connected, like if there was less of a connection between states or provinces and the federal government of whatever kind we're talking about, right? So that's ultimately why, like I said, I'm interested in radical political ideas, but they ultimately don't really make much logical sense. But I think they're interesting grains of why people have these instincts for this political ideas. And I like, since I'm doing much more deep dive philosophy videos, I like focusing much more on broader broader political philosophy concepts like this, like an anarchist perspective on whether government reform is possible, rather than just getting into the day in day like political baseball shit that is very fun to not focus on. Anyway, so I think I've said enough about that essay. Thanks everyone for watching this. Share this everywhere. Smash the like button. Make sweet love to it. Elbow drop it as long as you press it. Click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Going to put out another clip soon. Don't remember which one it is. Maybe about the book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate. Subscribe to the channel. Check out my Patreon page. Link is in the description as always. Most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and grooves in the heart. And philosophy and political philosophy are awesome. All right, adios until next time, everyone.